The Carolina Panthers defense has been very impressive so far this season. You might even say more impressive than my mustache, although that's not a high bar. Welcome to Pan Am Football. I'm Max Dean, the resident tired dad of Pan Am Football, and you can find me on Twitter at Pan Am Football. Today we're going to be breaking down the Carolina Panthers defense under Coach Phil Snow. We're going to talk about the defensive line. We're going to talk a little bit about their fronts. We're going to talk about their coverages, their blitzes, their simulated pressures, and even how they've acquired some of the talent that they have. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Now, before we get into the film of it all, I just want to point out how the Panthers reshaped this defense in their own image. Every defensive player that was on the Panthers before Matt Rhule's arrival that is still on the roster, you can see right before your eyes. So, not a lot. In just the first two drafts since Matt Rhule has arrived, they've drafted 11 new defenders, including 5 new defensive linemen and 6 new defensive backs, not to mention a first and second round pick at each of those two position groupings. And when it comes to free agency and trades, they targeted players with tweener, sort of hybrid skill sets. And I would point out notably Hassan Reddick as a tweener edge outside linebacker type, then Justin Burris as a tweener safety cornerback type, and Morgan Fox as an interior and edge defensive lineman. So just keep that in mind, and without further ado, let's look at some Dag-Gum game tape. As we start things off, I want to show you some Panthers defensive linemen winning one-on-one matchups. So right there's Brian Burns winning an inside move against George Fant. Wilson escapes, but incomplete. And then we have him going up against the same tackle, but hits the outside with a speed rush. And again, Wilson, pretty good job of avoiding the pressure, but even still, it's very effective and results in an incomplete pass. Now their other primary edge rusher, Hassan Reddick, beats Morgan Moses outside. And we'll look at Reddick again against Mekhi Becton, winning with an inside move. Just too much speed. And again, so far, no sacks, but plenty of incompletions. This is Reddick against the Texans right tackle, and he wins with another outside move, just a tremendous speed rusher. Now we're going to take a quick look at some of the lesser known guys. We have Morgan Fox, who's very versatile. Here he comes from basically 3-tech, and he just uses hand fighting to win against Andrus Peat there and pushes him right back to Jameis Winston. And now we have Fox on basically 5-tech, beating Ryan Ramczyk around the edge, who seems to be more preoccupied with the linebacker. But here's Daquan Jones, defensive tackle, just bull rushing Andrus Peat straight back. And this is the first one that results in a sack. Brian Burns' 3 sacks, which look good on paper, not a single one has he been touched on the way to the quarterback. There's one against the Jets. Here's one against the Saints. Completely untouched. Now we're going to look at one against the Texans. Same thing, completely untouched. So he's averaging a sack a game, but they're coming on completely untouched rushes. So how is that happening? Let's take a look here. We have a 5-man front, and this is going to be a simulated pressure. So it looks like these 5 guys are about to rush, but actually these 2 drop back into what becomes essentially a cover 3. And then these 4 come rushing. This linebacker comes out of coverage to blitz. Now, it's not actually a blitz because there's only 4 guys rushing, but effectively it does the same thing as a blitz. It creates a numbers mismatch. So we're about to watch that play from another angle 3 times. The first time, watch the linebacker who does not rush. The second time, watch the linebacker who rushes. And the third time, you can see it all happening in front of your eyes. So number 4, who does not rush, creates a little bit of distracting motion, so the center looks away. And by the time he realizes, it's too late for him to come back and create a proper 3-on-3. Now, the linebacker who does rush, number 7, splits the tackle and the guard, and the tackle turns back to him because they are taught to protect the fastest route to the quarterback. And what happens is Brian Burns is just too fast and takes advantage of that. And that untouched sack from the Saints game that I showed you a minute ago, guess what? It's the same exact play. Exactly the same, except that this time, instead of rushing, Shaq Mason is in the center and he drops back. and Jeremy Chin plays the role of that rushing linebacker. So these schemed sacks have been pretty straightforward, but I want to look at some funkier stuff now. Here we have 6 on the line, and we're going to drop the 3 interior guys, which will turn into essentially a cover 2, and then we're going to rush a linebacker on the right and a safety on the left. So it's still only a 4-man pressure, and Phil Snow seems to really like to maintain his coverage, so he likes to artificially create the numbers mismatch through confusion and keep numbers in coverage. Now, 2 of the players that I showed you earlier, Morgan Fox and Daquan Jones, are going to drop from the interior into coverage, and it's more or less effective, but let's watch the play unfold. So Daquan Jones is a true defensive tackle, and Fox is kind of a hybrid D-tackle, D-end type player. And you can see one is clearly more comfortable in coverage than the other. Right here, Jones drops too deep, and while the Texans' offensive line actually does a pretty good job of picking up the funky pressure, if Davis Mills had looked and seen David Johnson crossing right here, this could have actually gone for a really big gain. But the 3rd-round rookie doesn't see him, which is not a huge surprise, rolls out. And I think what the most impressive part of this play is actually that Morgan Fox comes out of coverage, actually gets into coverage, gets out of coverage, and then gets in for half the sack as well. So that's pretty impressive. All right, for the next one, we have 6 on the line, but then we drop Reddick and Thompson into coverage, and it becomes a cover 3 shell, and then the safety comes blitzing from the backfield. Now, the reason this works is because Alvin Kamara is in pass protection in the backfield, and the center thinks that he's going to pick up Jeremy Chin running through the A-gap. But Kamara sees the safety coming from the deep backfield and steps to the outside to pick him up and leaves Chin to run straight at Winston. You got to give Winston credit for that spin move, and in this moment, he actually believes he's beaten the blitz, and his receiver is running a deep post, and Justin Burris, the safety, has given up the leverage there, thinking that the pressure got to him. And if it were not for the fact that Yetur Gross-Matos actually gets up from being pancaked by Tyron Smith right here and then reapply pressure to Jameis Winston, that would probably be a touchdown, and Jameis ends up just falling away from the throw, and it ends up being a pick. But this is why you never give up on a play. And now a few more examples of the defensive line just being very, very well coached. Here we have Brian Burns coming around the edge, and he doesn't end up getting the pressure, but tips the pass. So we're going to see a bunch of this. Next up is Derek Brown. But one of the things that offensive coaches will do to defeat the blitz is quick passes. And that means the trajectory is usually lower. Here we've got Davion Roy. And so you get your defensive linemen to pay attention to the quarterback and get their hands up and tip those passes. It's the consistency with which they're doing it just shows what a good job the coaching staff is doing. So executing all these blitzes and then tipping the passes. Here we've got one that doesn't end up being tipped, but the pass was a little bit overthrown. And if it wasn't, that's why I gave you the other angle there. But if it wasn't overthrown, it would hit him right in the hands. Now I just want to look at Brian Burns being a beast. He's about to come off of his rush, chip the running back out of the route, and then force the fumble and turnover. So we're gonna watch that from the other angle. He starts his rush. He sees that it's supposed to be a quick pass to Kamara. He hits Kamara, comes back, and forces the fumble. Now it's time to take a look at their stellar run defense, which is putting them in all of these 3rd and long. So this is about to be a tackle for loss, and I want to pause it right here because this is an example of how the defensive backs are so well coached as well as not just the defensive line. So Dante Jackson right here is being very patient because the wide receiver he was just covering stepped up to block and showed that he is not running a route. But the difference between aggressively attacking the run now and right now is the difference between left guard Andrus Peat identifying you as the man to block and being picked off for a large gain. Instead, it ends up being a tackle for loss. Well, really more of a no gain, but regardless. And for good measure, we'll take another look at a really good decision by Dante Jackson. So right here, we have the ball carrier, and right here we have Justin Burris, who chooses to step back outside and push the run a little bit more out. But now we have to give Dante Jackson credit because a lot of defensive backs would cut inside here and try to be more aggressive. But the wide out here would probably just push him inside and it would end up giving up the edge. But instead, Jackson trusts his teammates and his speed. He takes a step outside and shoots up for a tackle for a loss. On the next play, we're going to take a look at some unique personnel packages. And what we've got here are 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, 2 of them off ball, 3 safeties, 1 of them playing nickel, Justin Burris, who just happened to be drafted as a corner, and 2 outside cornerbacks. Now, I just want to point out something here. I see a total of 4 players out of these 11 defenders that are really set in position. Every other player can play 2 to 3 positions. So that makes it pretty hard to read exactly what the defense is going to do when you're lining up and trying to effectively call a play. So the way that I'm interpreting this play is that there are intended to be these 5 players rushing and the rest in zone coverage. The Texans know that the Panthers like to line up with their 3 tech on the strong side, which is the side where the tight end is lined up, and they're doing that right here. So what they want to do is bring the wide receiver over from the right, which is the weak side, to the left, which is the strong side, and create a better numbers matchup for their weak side run. But the Panthers shift their zones so that they send Shaq Thompson out into a zone on the strong side where the receiver numbers have just increased by 1, and they bring Justin Burris down to the line to add that 5th rusher. Now, Derek Brown pretty much blew that up by himself, but I wanted to show you the personnel package. Now, here's the shift, and then you can see Brown at 3 tech just getting back there and knifing through. And now is the part of the episode where I get to talk about how good Hassan Reddick is in this defense. So this is going to be a tackle for loss from Justin Burris. Burris is right there. We're going to watch the all-22. You'll see the entire defense shift to the defensive right as the motion starts and Burris makes the tackle. But now, when we watch the end zone cam, I want you to watch Hassan Reddick right here. Hello. He just took a double team from a rather diminutive wide receiver, but the 14th overall pick, Elijah Vera-Tucker at offensive guard there, and put them both essentially on their ass and completely disrupted that play. So Burris gets the TFL, but Hassan Reddick almost single-handedly just blew up that play. And here's one more little secret for you. Hassan Reddick, who's averaging more than a sack a game, almost all of them are coming on play action. Now, here against the Jets, they're basically running 4-man front, 2 D tackles, 2 linebackers, 2 different plays here. And yeah, granted, Zach Wilson should have just got the ball out way before he's actually sacked here. But they are basically trusting their coverage, and they're just knifing through, and they're not playing gap contain at all. Now, they play more of a bare front, and they've got 5 guys on the line against the Saints who have a much better offensive line. You'll see almost all of his sacks are coming on play action. And because what happens is he's so fast, by the time the quarterback comes out of play action, it's over. So it's a little more complicated than this, but I feel like I can break it down for you into 4 basic tenets of how they developed this dominant defense in Carolina. First, they accumulated versatile defenders through the draft and free agency. Then, on rundowns, they aggressively attacked the backfield with their defensive linemen. Then, on those same downs, they rely on their well-coached defensive backs to tackle. Once they get to 3rd down, they employ a wide array of unique zone-based blitzes and simulated pressures to get to the quarterback. So, if you like what you've seen, again, please throw me a like. You can subscribe, and we'll be doing a new film room each and every week. We also do our Patreon voted video, which will come out tomorrow, and will be a salary cap video all about the edge defender market, primarily focusing on TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, and Joey Bosa. Remember, I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at PanAmFootball, and I will see you all next week.